Imagine walking through iron doors that slam shut behind you, knowing you'll never come out the same. In medieval Europe, prison was just a place to hold the accused. It was a machine built to strip away identity, dignity, and even memory itself. For women, every step deeper into the dungeon was another step toward erasure. Some were left to starve in silence, others were scarred forever as living warnings, and many endured horrors long before a judge ever spoke a verdict. Their punishments weren't about justice. They were about control. And the shocking truth is, what happened inside these prisons was often far worse than execution. Stripped of identity. The moment a woman entered a medieval prison, she stopped being a person and became property. The first step was often brutal in its simplicity. Her head was shaved. To us, that might seem like a practical measure, but in medieval society, a woman's hair symbolized dignity, modesty, and her very femininity. Cutting it off wasn't about hygiene, it was about humiliation. It was the system's way of saying, you are no longer who you were. Shackles followed, clanging heavy against wrists and ankles, each movement a reminder of captivity. In 13th century England, court records from York and London describe women locked in bilboes iron bars, pinning legs and place or chained directly to stone walls. Prisons were not designed to rehabilitate. They were repurposed castle basements, monastery rooms, and city hall chambers. The air was damp, the stone cold, and the population mixed thieves, debtors, and condemned criminals all thrown together. For women, separate facilities were almost non-existent. A German legal scholar in the early 1500s put it plainly: let them be confined and abased. The goal wasn't correction, it was degradation. From the first lock of hair that hit the floor to the weight of iron on their skin, the message was clear. This wasn't just prison, this was erasure of self. And as cruel as this beginning was, what lay deeper inside the dungeon was far worse. Starvation cells, silent death sentences. Not all punishment left visible scars. Some worked quietly, slowly, killing without fire, whip, or verdict. Hidden beneath dungeon floors were hunger cells, or oubliettes, forgotten places. And that's exactly what they were. Spaces designed to erase. These coffins of stone were carved into castle foundations in places like Loches Castle or the Bastille. Women accused of moral crimes or witchcraft were lowered through trapdoors and left without light, bedding, or sufficient food. Survival wasn't the point. Chroniclers in England noted women kept in close ward, without bread or water for days. Suffering was prolonged. Prisoners lay in filth, infested with lice, their bodies wasting away. Screams echoed for days before fading into silence. Death came from starvation, thirst, or infection, and often their deaths were never recorded. No trial, no burial in consecrated ground, not even a name written in the ledger. Just vanished. Starvation cells weren't punishment alone, they were a warning. Every woman who disappeared in that darkness served as a living lesson to the rest. Accusation alone could mean obliteration. But for women who survived the oubliette, punishment awaited in a more permanent public form. Branded for sin, marks that never faded. If starvation erased quietly, branding burned the message into flesh. In medieval Europe, crime and morality were inseparable. For women, being labeled immoral could lead to punishment as severe as murder. Accusations of adultery, prostitution, or simply living without governance could condemn a woman for life. Branding became a visible punishment. In England, women suspected of prostitution called nightwalkers might be branded with a V, permanently marking them as sinners. In Scotland, laws allowed repeat offenders, including women deemed idle or unruly, to be marked with iron. Court records from London and York document women punished for common misconduct with branding, sometimes alongside public whipping. This wasn't just pen, it was stigma. A branded woman could never reclaim her social standing. Her flesh broadcast her crime, whether true or not. The marks were meant to humiliate, control, and isolate. And while branding left permanent scars on the body, the horrors of torture awaited women accused of something far darker: witchcraft. Witch trials behind bars, torture before the verdict. For women accused of witchcraft, imprisonment was only the beginning. By the late 1400s, which panic spread across Europe, the Malleus Maleficarum declared women naturally prone to witchcraft and endorsed torture to extract confessions. In Germany, Italy, Switzerland, and France, prisons became torture chambers. The strappado hoisted women by the arms, dropping them suddenly to strained shoulders. Thumbscrews crushed fingers. The boot compressed legs with wedges until bones broke. In England, the rack stretched bodies to breaking point. And all of this was done while the accused were still legally innocent. Confessions were not just expected, they were demanded. Under torture, women were often forced to name others, fueling a cascade of arrests. Entire communities were destroyed as hysteria spread. Hysteria spread medieval to Shackled, 1626 to 1631. Over 150 women were executed following confessions extracted under pain. Prison wasn't a cage, it was a tool to rewrite truth, turning law into a ritual of humiliation and fear. The psychological toll. Fear as punishment. Even beyond physical torment, the mental anguish was devastating. Women were isolated, stripped of identity, starved, branded, and tortured, all as a warning to others. Anne de Chantrin, a young woman in 17th century France, though slightly post-medieval, was imprisoned under accusations of witchcraft. Chroniclers noted her mental collapse after days of solitary confinement, illustrating the psychological toll of fear and isolation before execution. In England, Alice Nutter, accused in the Pendle witch trials, spent weeks in cold, dark dungeons. The constant threat of torture, public shame, and uncertainty drove many accused women to despair long before any sentence. The psychological punishment worked hand in hand with physical suffering. Survival often depended not on innocence, but on compliance. Women learned quickly that silence, obedience, or confession even false was sometimes the only way to live. Reflections. Control, not justice. Medieval prisons weren't about crime, they were about control. Women weren't just punished, they were erased, marked, and manipulated to enforce societal norms. Some, like Agnes Bernauer in Bavaria, died under imprisonment and torture for being perceived as socially or morally transgressive. Others, like Elizabeth Johnson and Annika van Hanswyck, carried permanent scars from branding or corporal punishment, enduring humiliation even after release. Even when women survived, the system had succeeded. Communities were kept in fear, and patriarchal authority went unchallenged. These prisons didn't just lock women away, they rewrote what it meant to be female in a world ruled by fear. And today, these stories remind us of how power and authority can be weaponized under the guise of law and morality. So, consider this. Were these prisons truly about punishing crime? Or controlling women through fear? Comment your thoughts below.